So the main objective is to protect and improve the quality of the environment. So any rule or regulation is broken, this act can directly put a penalty to the people. So what is this Montreal Protocol? So Montreal Protocol mainly aims at protecting the ozone layer. So what is this Chemical Weapons Convention? The name itself suggests it has something to do with the chemical weapons, right? Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on Environmental Studies for second semester B.Ba. I'm Dr. Divya, Environmental Studies faculty, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. So in today's session, let us continue with Unit 6, that is Environmental Policies and Practices. So in this session, we'll completely concentrate on the different environmental laws that have been laid by the Indian government as well as some international agreements. So to begin with, what is environmental law? So environmental law is a collective term that includes aspects of the law which is mainly designed in order to provide protection to the environment. Anything that is harming the environment or causing problems to the environment, that has to be stopped or reduced. For that, environmental laws are set up. So there are various laws that have been put forth by the Indian government. What are those? Let's look into. So talking about the Environmental Protection Act. So this act was passed in the year 1986. And it was enacted by, or it was put forth by, the Parliament of India, but it came into effect, though it was started, or though it was said that we need to have an Environmental Protection Act in the year 1986, it came into force on 19th November 1986. And in this particular act, it is not, there are different sections that are present. In that section, it consists of 4 chapters and 26 sections. So what are there in this 4 chapter and 26 sections? Every rules and regulation will be there which the central government and the state government has to follow, and which the people of that particular country also has to follow. So here, for this law, actually it was set up not in India, but the decision, that is, of course it was set up in India, but the decision to set up this law actually was taken at the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm in the month of June in the year 1972. So it was already decided in 1972. So India was also a participant of this particular conference, that is United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm. So here, at that time, that is on June 1972, when India participated, they also decided that we need to put forth a separate law which should have all the rules and regulations that the people of India or the central and the state government of India should follow. So India participated in this particular conference, wherein after that particular conference, they took appropriate steps for the protection and improvement of human and the environment. And this law, actually after that also they had an idea to put forth this law, but once Bhopal gas tragedy happened, that was the time when it was a waking call for the government, wherein then they decided strictly that okay, we have to put the laws if we need to protect the environment. And that is the time, in the year 1986, the Environment Protection Act came into existence. So it was implemented on the wake of Bhopal gas tragedy. So this was the spark that actually, or this was the incident that generated a spark in the Indian government, stating that we need to strictly protect the environment. So talking about the aims and objectives of Environmental Protection Act, there are a lot of objectives, rules and regulations, because I told you there are different chapters and many number of sections, right? So few of them I've just put here. So what are the aims and objectives of Environmental Protection Act? So the main objective is to protect and improve the quality of the environment. Next is to control and to reduce pollution that comes from different sources. So be it air pollution, water pollution, the noise pollution. So all sorts of pollutions need to be controlled under this particular law, and also the prohibition or restriction should be put in operating any industrial facility on the environmental grounds. So say for example, if an industry has to be set up, what are the rules and regulations that has to be followed by the industry? Say for example, before letting out the waste into the rivers, it should be treated. That is, sewage treatment has to be done. The chimneys has to be, that is the exhaust pipes that are there in the industries, that has to be of a certain height, and industries should not be placed in a highly populated area where human beings are inhabited, or it should not be placed in an area which is having good fertile soil. So industries are usually set up in areas where no other plants can grow there, that is barren lands are usually preferred. So like that, different laws put under this particular environmental protection, and it provides protection and improvement of the environment, and it empowers the central government to establish authorities who have the capability of preventing environmental pollution in all its forms, and also in order to tackle or take care of specific environmental problems that are peculiar or particular to different parts of the country. So it is not just one or two person will be sitting there, will be framing the law and everybody has to follow it. No, that will not help. So the laws will be framed by the committee, wherein such laws will be implemented. It will be made known to the people, and what if the people do not follow all these rules and regulations, they'll be put some amount of fine. So for all that, different people monitor that, right? Say for example, even our emission test of vehicles is done by the traffic police. They are given the authority. There is no separate person who is assigned for that. So likewise, we have the pollution control board, who every now and then visits the polluted lakes, rivers, and also the polluted areas. They take samples of polluted air, water, and all that, and keep checking that is, what is the extent of pollution, whether the pollution is increasing year by year or reducing. If it is increasing, what methods can be followed, how can the people be educated about it. All these will be done by it comes under the Environmental Protection Act, and it sets standards for emission or discharge of environmental pollutants. Like we have the Bharat standards that are there, like how much amount of pollutants can be released by the vehicle. More than that, we have emission testing centers, right, wherein every few months once the emission testing has to be done, otherwise a fine will be put. So like that, various standards of emission testing and all that has been set up, and it controls the generation, collection, treatment, import, storage, and handling of hazardous waste. So there also we had studied in one of the sessions like how the waste management is done. So for waste management also there are some rules, like you need to separate the recyclable material, should be put in a separate dustbin. Electronic items should be put in a separate dustbin. The wet waste should be put in a separate dustbin so that it can go for composting. So like that, all these rules and regulations are being framed by this particular Environmental Protection Act, which the people has to follow. And it sets up an authority to inspect, that is, a group of people or a committee or an authority is being set up. So this authority, every year they will visit the industries in order to check the activities of the industries. That is, whether the industries are disposing the waste in a proper manner, whether they have whatever emission standards are there, whether they are following that, whether they are treating the chemical waste before letting it into the industries. All that once in every year these committees will go and check and make a note of it. And the manufacture, the use, import, export, and storage of hazardous microorganisms or genetically engineered organisms or cells are checked in order to protect the environment. We have watched a lot of English movies, right, wherein there are a lot of genetically engineered crocodiles are there. They show a lot of genetically engineered sharks and all that, which what they do is because of negligence, or there is a movie related to a virus, like how the virus escapes from the laboratory and it spreads to different people because of the negligence of the scientists in that particular laboratory. Or we had taken the example wherein in one of the universities of Delhi, how they actually gave away the radioactive material to the scrape workers by mistake without their knowledge. So that is how all these needs to be taken care of. If only if rules are set, then people will follow. Otherwise, nobody will be bothered about it. So all these rules and regulations, whether how you need to handle a hazardous microorganism, how you need to handle a genetically engineered organism, because some lab experiment you're doing on a rat, you can't just let the rat escape into the natural habitat, right? You have to make sure what you need to do with it, how you need to take care of it, how you need to take care of the microbes so that you don't release a harmful microbe to the environment. So all that will be taken care by the Environment Protection Act, wherein various committees will be set up. So about all these rules and regulations in this particular, they have different sections in which they have all these rules and regulations. So next, talking about the Air Act, which is the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. So it was implemented in the year 1981 and it was put forth by Parliament of India, but it came into existence in the year 1987, that it was followed in the year 1987, and this article has a section of that is 54 sections are there, wherein each section will have a set of rules and regulations according to the air pollution. So talking about the aims and objectives of Air Act or the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. So it provides for the prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. So what all needs to be done to prevent, to control and to minimize air pollution, all that will be taken care by this particular act. And it provides for the establishment of central and state boards. So we have the Central Pollution Control Board, the State Pollution Control Board, with a view to implement the act. So what is the function of these Central Pollution Control Boards and the State Pollution Control Board is to make sure that in their area, be it in the center or be it in the state, the act is being implemented. People are being punished accordingly for the pollution that they create to the air. So all that will be taken care by this particular act, and it confers on the boards the powers to implement the provisions of the act and assign to the boards functions relating to the pollution. So whatever boards, that is pollution control boards, have been set up in the central and the state government, they are given full authority to make sure that the laws are implemented and people tend to follow the act, and they can punish them according to the offense they have conducted or offense they have made. So that is the function of the Pollution Control Act or Pollution Air Act, which actually sets up committees both in the center and the state to curb the air pollution. And it advises the central government on any matter related to the improvement of the quality of the air and related to preventing, controlling and abatement of air pollution. Because if the central government will be first noted, the central government will make sure that the state government is following these rules and regulations or implementing these rules and regulations, and the state government will implement those rules and regulations on the people, which the people have to follow. So this is otherwise we know for a simple one, the emission test, if you don't get the emission test done, we need to pay certain amount of fine, right? So all these are set by these committees, the other pollution control committees itself. And to plan and cause to be executed a nationwide program for the prevention, control or abatement of air pollution. So they plan to conduct programs throughout the country so that people are made aware of the ill effects caused by air pollution and what are the laws, rules and regulations framed for air pollution and all that. And they coordinate the activities of the state and resolve disputes among them. So, whatever disputes are there regarding the air pollution within the states, that will be coordinated by the central committee and they try to solve these disputes. So, these are also the objectives. And it provides technical assistance and guidance to the state boards so that the state boards, the committee members, can carry out and sponsor investigation and research relating to problems of air pollution and how they can prevent, control or abatement of air pollution. So, the central committee that is there, they actually help the state committee to carry out investigations or research as to exactly what is going wrong in that particular state because the air pollution is increasing and what can be done in order to prevent that air pollution. So, that is how by coordinating with one another, both the center and the state committees work under this Air Act. Next, talking about the Water Act, that is the Water Prevention and Pollution Control Act. So, this was set up in the year 1974 and it has 8 chapters and 64 sections in which various rules and regulations have been framed, but it came into implementation in the year 1988. So, the main aims and objectives of Water Act is to prevent and control water pollution and to maintain and to restore the quality of the water that is already there. And this act also carries out the purpose of assigning a set of responsibilities. They assign powers and functions to the central and the state boards for the prevention and control of water pollution. And they also provide advice to the central government on any matter that is related to or that is concerned with water pollution and the prevention of water pollution. And it coordinates the activities of the state board and it tries to resolve the water crisis or the water pollution problem within the states. And it also provides technical assistance and guidance to the state board so that it can carry out investigation. Same thing, like what is done for air pollution, the same thing is done for water pollution also. Here also technical assistance, guidance, knowledge and some help will be provided so that the state government can carry out investigations to actually what is causing water pollution, what is leading to eutrophication in a particular lake, what is actually causing the death of fishes in that particular lake. So, various committees will be set up for that who will work towards these aspects of preventing water pollution. Next is to collect, to group them, that is to compile and to publish technical and statistical data relating to water pollution and based on that statistical data take appropriate measures in order to effectively prevent and control water pollution. So, all these will be done by the Water Act. Under this, there are various rules and regulations which I again put under different sections. So, next is the Wildlife Protection Act. So, it was started in the year 1972 and it was enacted by the Parliament of India, and this Wildlife Protection Act has 66 sections and 6 schedules. And the main aims and objectives of the Wildlife Protection Act is to protect animals and plants and to make sure that hunting is prohibited on specified wild animals, birds and plants. We can hunt certain animals like wild boars and all that. To some extent it can be hunted. Or some rodents which are causing problem to the crop fields, all that can be hunted. But not all animals can be hunted. Not all plants can be misused from the wild. So, certain rules and regulations are framed for that. So therefore, they prohibit on hunting of specific wildlife, animals, birds and plants. And they also check or put a control on the trade and commerce in wildlife and wildlife products. So people are crazy over wildlife products, right? It means that there's something great if they have some natural wildlife product in their house. Say for example, if they have the tiger's claws, if they have the antlers of the deer and all that, and if they have a stuffed animal in their house, they feel somewhat a pride, but actually it is against the rules and regulations. So therefore, the government tries to put, or this particular act, that is the Wildlife Protection Act, tries to put a control over the trade and commerce. Otherwise, what happens? Say for example, the trade of some of the lizards are too much. Why? Because it is said that the lizards have some medicinal properties. The trade of the elephant tusk is also too much, because elephant tusks are quite costly, and that ivory of the elephant tusk is actually used in making a lot of artifacts. So that is why, or craft material. So that is why it is of great demand, and illegally a lot of trade is going on. So therefore, a control of trade and commerce in wild and wildlife products have to be curbed. And it also lays down the procedures for declaration of protected areas such as national park, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserve and community reserve. So here in national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, people cannot just randomly walk in wherever they like. There are some restricted areas or some buffer zones wherein people should never ever enter. If they enter, what will happen? If some illegal activity is conducted there, such as poaching and all that, or cutting of trees, what will happen? So all those rules and regulations will be framed under, or are framed under, the Wildlife Protection Act in order to conserve these particular forest reserves. Next, they regulate possession, access or transfer of trade in wild animals, plants, animal articles, trophies and taxidermy thereof. So what they do is they regulate, or they put some break, or they put some rules and regulations in order to prevent the trade or transfer of wild animals from one place to another. Say for example, you need to bring an exotic animal or exotic plant species from one country to another country. A lot of rules and regulations or formalities are there which need to be followed. So all that will be set up by the Wildlife Protection Act. And also, if you keep a animal at home, that is taxidermy. Taxidermy means keeping it as a showpiece. If you do that also, what happens? Somebody puts a complaint or gives a complaint, then very soon the forest officers will be in your doorstep. So that is what some rules and regulations are there which needs to be followed. Even cutting of trees is also not allowed in our premises. In our own land area also, we are not supposed to cut trees. We are supposed to tell it to the forest officials. They'll come, they'll number the trees, and with their permission we are supposed to cut it. So a lot of rules and regulations are there, with all that are framed by the Wildlife Protection Act. And they provide penalties for contravention of the act as imprisonment, fine or both. So we have put a fine, right? Fine of certain amount. And moreover, after putting fine, still we don't reduce the illegal activities, and still we try to pose a threat to the wildlife, the environment and all that, the people can be put under prison. So for that also various penalties will be set up, like for this particular crime what should be the penalty. So like that, all that will be framed by the Wildlife Protection Act itself. Next is the Forest Conservation Act. So this was started in the year 25th October 1980. It has 5 sections, and the act is followed throughout India, that is in all the states of India, but except it is not followed in Jammu and Kashmir. So it is not implemented in Jammu and Kashmir, but apart from that, throughout India, this particular act is followed. So the aims and objectives of Forest Conservation Act. So the act makes a provision of a prior approval of the central government necessary before a state government or any other authority issues direction for de-reservation of reserved forest, use of forest land for non-forest purpose, assigning forest land by way of lease or otherwise to any private person or to any authority, corporation and agency. So, under the Forest Conservation Act, people cannot randomly create a resort, build a resort or build a homestay or whatever in a piece of forest land. They need to take provisions or they need to take approval before itself from the central government, and once the approval is sanctioned, then only they can use the forest area. That is, we all know that in some of the reserved forest area there are beautiful resorts, jungle resorts and all that being set up, right? Do you think randomly anybody can do that? No, you need to get a license which is approved by the central government. Then only, if they only says, there will be some rules like how you are disposing the waste, how you should be there, how the building should be there, what sort of land you need to use, all that rules and regulations will be there. If they are following all these, or if their building meets all these standards, then only they can use that particular forest land, or that forest land can be rented or given as a lease to them. That is the main aim of the Forest Conservation Act, wherein for the use of forest products, for the use of non-forest products, for the use of the forest land for recreational purposes and all that, direct permission should be taken from the central government itself. And it puts a restriction on the state government for de-reservation of forest or use of forest land for non-forest purposes. So, we cannot depend on the state government. Why we cannot depend on the state government? Because they might fear that the state government may favor the people whom they know. So, that is why what they do is directly they have to take permissions from the central government, and no state government here can help with any of the recreational activities related, that is private recreational activities such as building of resorts, homestays and all that in the forest premises. This act actually can put penalty for contravention of the provisions of the act. So, under different sections, there are some provisions or rules and regulations. So, any rule or regulation is broken, this act can directly put a penalty to the people. So, here in this act, there is that section 3B, which deals with cases in which the offence is made by the authorities or government department. Now, okay, if people are the ones who are creating the problem, then there are certain rules and regulations. What if the government itself doesn't follow the rule and regulation according to the Forest Protection Act? Then there is a particular section, which is section 3B, in which a lot of rules and regulations are put forth to state that what has to be done if the authorities of the government department or the forest officials themselves do not follow the rules and regulations. So, this is about the aims and objectives of the Forest Conservation Act. So, apart from that, the central government may, by notification in the official gazette, make rules for carrying out the provisions of this particular act. So, the central government has the complete authority to make new set of rules for even more strengthening this particular act so that the forest gets conserved. And whoever doesn't follow this particular rules and regulations that have been put under this act, then under the section 2, there are some rules and regulations. So, under section 2, there are some rules and regulations to state, which states that what can be done to people who do not follow the rules and regulations set up in all the other sections. So, they can be punished with simple imprisonment for a period which may extend to 15 days. So, in spite of warning, in spite of everything, if they don't still follow, they can be directly put into prison for about 15 days. So, these are the aims and objectives of the Forest Conservation Act. So, next from here, let us study about some of the international agreements. So there are few international agreements which has been given in your syllabus. So I've just taken them. So here, first one is Montreal Protocol. So what is this Montreal Protocol? So Montreal Protocol is an international agreement that was signed on 16th September 1987. So what this protocol does actually, we shall look into. So this protocol till date, in this particular Montreal Protocol, all the 198 United Nations member states have participated and they are following this Montreal Protocol. So what is this Montreal Protocol? So Montreal Protocol mainly aims at protecting the ozone layer. In the previous session we had studied, right, depletion of the ozone layer. If you simply go and make a speech to the people saying that you need to protect the ozone layer, you need to stop using CFCs and all that, will they do that? No, there has to be some rules and regulations, then only people will follow. That was done by the Montreal Protocol. So the main function of the Montreal Protocol is to protect the ozone layer by phasing out or by completely stopping or reducing the production of substances that are responsible for the depletion of the ozone layer. So in the previous session, we had studied under ozone depletion, right? There are some chlorofluorocarbons and there are some products that are used in fire extinguishers, aerosol sprays, etc. that actually cause ozone depletion. So the main aim of the Montreal Protocol is to completely stop the production of such products which use chemicals that are responsible for bringing about the depletion of the ozone layer. And this Montreal Protocol, it sets out a mandatory timetable for the phase out of ozone depleting substances. That is, whichever nation is participating, I told you 198 United Nations member states are participating in this Montreal Protocol, right? So all the 198 member states are given certain duration of time or a time period in which they have to make sure that all the products which are containing ozone depleted substances should be stopped from being manufactured. So that is what it means here. That is a mandatory timetable for the stopping of the production of ozone depleting substances is done by this particular Montreal Protocol. So this Montreal Protocol also sets binding progressive phase out obligations for both developed as well as developing countries, wherein they put some rules and regulations for the developed and the developing countries in order to stop manufacturing major ozone depleting substances such as chlorofluorocarbons, halogens and less damaging transitional chemicals such as hydrochlorofluorocarbons. So, Montreal Protocol also puts some rules and regulations to some developing and developed countries to make sure that very soon they stop the manufacturing of products containing chlorofluorocarbons, halogens and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, which are the substances that are the main reasons for causing ozone layer depletion. And since the introduction of the Montreal Protocol, it has phased out over 98% of the world's consumption of ozone depleting substances. So all these 9 ozone depleting substances that have been used in the manufacturing of various products, all that has been put to a halt. That is 98%. The Montreal Protocol has been successful in putting a halt or stopping the manufacturing of materials that contain ozone depleting substances. So the main aim of the Montreal Protocol is to prevent countries from manufacturing ozone depleting substances so that the ozone layer can be protected. So that is the main function of the Montreal Protocol. Next, talking about one more international agreement, that is the Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol was adopted at the 3rd conference of the parties to the UNFCCC. So there was a conference that was held in Kyoto, Japan on 11th December 1997, and during that conference actually the Kyoto Protocol was adopted. So it is called Kyoto Protocol because the conference was held in Kyoto, that is Japan, on 11th December 1997. So what is this Kyoto Protocol? It is an international agreement that mainly focuses on reducing the emission of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide emission and the presence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So like how Montreal Protocol mainly takes care of the ozone layer, Kyoto Protocol takes care of the emission of the greenhouse gases, because we know that greenhouse gases emission can lead to global warming, and global warming can lead to a lot of disasters to the environment. So the Kyoto Protocol entered into force on 16th February 2005. So actually it was started in 11th December 1997 in a conference that was held in Kyoto in Japan, but actually it came into full force on 16th February 2005, and at present there are about 192 parties that have signed this particular Kyoto Protocol treaty, and till date they are following this particular protocol wherein they aim to prevent the use of greenhouse gases. And under this protocol, 37 industrialized countries and the European community have committed or taken an oath to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases by an average of 5% against the 1990 levels over the 5-year period 2008 to 2012. So what they have said is, whatever levels of greenhouse gases were present in the year 1990, that we will reduce to, in a 5-year period, we will make sure that at least 5% of the greenhouse gases gets reduced from this planet. So that is what the oath they took, that is 37 industrialized country, they took an oath under the Kyoto Protocol. So the main aim or the main function of the Kyoto Protocol is to prevent excessive emission or to curb the excessive emission of greenhouse gases which can lead to global warming. Next is Convention on Biological Diversity. So Convention on Biological Diversity is an international legally binding treaty which has 3 main goals. First goal is conservation of biodiversity. Second one is sustainable use of biodiversity. About all this we have studied in the previous sessions already. Next is fair and equitable share of the benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. So they actually maintain these 3 goals. One is they aim at conserving the biodiversity or protecting the biodiversity. Next is they aim at making sustainable use of biodiversity. So what is sustainable use of biodiversity? Using biodiversity logically in such a way that the next future generations can also use the biodiversity like how we are using it. So that is sustainable use of biodiversity. Next is whatever genetic resources is there, that is fair and equitably shared between different countries. So all these are the goals of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So this Convention on Biological Diversity has been followed by 196 nations so far, but till date the United States has not followed the Convention of Biological Diversity, and the objectives of Convention on Biological Diversity is to develop national strategies for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, which is one of the key documents regarding sustainable development. And this particular CBD, that is Convention on Biological Diversity, is open for signature at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro on 5th June 1992. So this particular treaty was signed in the Earth Summit that was held in Rio de Janeiro in 5th June 1992, but it came into force on 29th December 1993. And one of the greatest achievements of the Convention on Biological Diversity so far is it has been able to generate huge amount of interest in biodiversity among people living in both the developed as well as the developing countries. And biodiversity is now seen as a critically important environment and development issues. There are a lot of organizations, government and non-government organizations, environmental sectors who actually try to bring up programs and try to conserve the biodiversity as well as educate the people about the biodiversity. The simple one is, even we are studying now environmental studies, right? Why was the need to put in environmental studies for the non-science students? Why? Because everybody living in this planet, every individual needs to understand the value of biodiversity and safeguard it. So that is why various interests have been put forth in the people, or both in the developed and the developing countries, by the Convention on Biological Diversity in order to protect the biodiversity. So next, talking about the Chemical Weapons Convention. So this treaty, that is the Chemical Weapons Convention, came into force on April 29th, 1997, wherein 160 plus countries have signed this particular treaty, with 85 plus countries having followed this international agreement. So 160 plus countries have signed the treaty, of which 85 plus countries are till date following this particular treaty of the Chemical Weapons Convention. So what is this Chemical Weapons Convention? The name itself suggests it has something to do with the chemical weapons, right? So the objective of the Chemical Weapons Convention, that is CWC, is to rid the world of chemical weapons by prohibiting their development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, retention, transfer and use. So those countries who have signed the treaty or who are still following the Chemical Weapons Convention Act, they are supposed to take care of the chemical weapons, wherein they are supposed to prohibit the development, prohibit the production, or stop acquiring or stocking or retention or transfer and use of chemical weapons. And also, these countries, whoever has signed this treaty, they are supposed to destroy the existing chemical weapons which they already have, so that they don't use it. So if the chemical weapons are there, obviously when there is a war happening between two countries, they'll tend to use it. And these chemical weapons can be so devastating, it can make the whole land not suitable for human living. So that is why, to prevent such problems, this Chemical Weapons Convention has come into force, wherein they not just check on the chemical weapons, then they not just check on the production of chemical weapons, the use of chemical weapons, but already if chemical weapons are there in these particular countries, they are supposed to destroy these chemical weapons. And also, the stocks of chemical weapons must be totally destroyed over a 10-year period. So a 10-year period will be given to them. Within that 10-year period, whatever chemical weapons these countries are possessing or they have stocked and piled up, all that should be, that is, discarded or destroyed according to this particular treaty of Chemical Weapons Convention. And the weapons possessing states, whichever states are possessing the weapons, they have to accelerate their or increase their destruction schedule as long as the means for destruction is environmental safe and sound. And even here also, when these chemical weapons possessing countries or states are trying to destroy the weapons, they must make sure that the destruction of these chemical weapons do not pose a threat to the environment. So that also should be followed. And the Chemical Weapons Convention also takes care of it checks or monitors the trade in certain chemicals that may be used to manufacture chemical weapons. It not just deals directly with the chemical weapons, but also it takes care that illegal trade of chemicals that can be used in the manufacturing of chemical weapons is stopped. So that is also one of the main aims of the Chemical Weapon Convention. So this was about the Chemical Weapons Convention. So the Montreal Protocol mainly deals with putting a brake to the production of chemicals that depletes the ozone layer. The Kyoto Protocol makes sure that the greenhouse gases emission is reduced, and the Chemical Weapons Convention makes sure that the countries whichever has signed this particular treaty, they should not possess any chemical weapon. So this is about the international treaties. So this was about the session wherein we completely learnt about the laws regarding to the environment and also some of the international agreements and treaties. In the next session, which is the last session of this unit, we shall study about nature reserves, tribal populations and the rights of the tribal people, and also the conflict between humans and wildlife, especially in India. So we'll meet again in the coming session with these three topics. Thank you.